My name is Mary, and I'm nearing my late 50s. I have 2 children. My older son is now an adult with a job and is planning to marry his girlfriend soon, while my daughter is in college. She studies hard but also seems to be really enjoying her time at university. With my kids growing up, I feel like my role as a mother is almost complete. As a former nurse, I'm considering going back into caregiving. Then, I received shocking news. My father-in-law, Bob, had a stroke. My husband, John, called to tell me, and I rushed to the hospital where Bob was admitted. Bob has always been kind and gentle, and he's treated me very well, but I've been concerned about him since his wife, Alice, passed away 3 years ago. He seemed down and low on energy since then. I would visit him occasionally and noticed he didn't seem like himself, so we often invited him out with the kids to lift his spirits. Recently, he'd been showing signs of feeling better, so news of his stroke really worried me. When I got to the hospital, John's sister, Isabella, and her husband were already there. I rushed over and asked how Bob was doing. Isabella seemed annoyed and replied, "You're late. We have somewhere to be, so can you stay here instead?" Then she left quickly. Isabella has always been a bit distant toward Bob, and she was the same with Alice when she was alive. Although Bob and Alice were always kind to her, she never seemed to appreciate them. I waited anxiously while Bob was in surgery. After a while, John arrived, looking worried and exhausted. When he asked if Bob was okay, I shook my head, and John's face went pale, but I quickly told him, "No, he's still in surgery. We don't know yet." John looked a little relieved, then sat down in a chair, still visibly upset. I tried to comfort him, putting my hand on his back, but I didn't really know what else to say. A few hours later, the doctor called us into a small room to give an update. He told us that Bob's surgery was successful, but he would likely need long-term care due to some lasting effects of the stroke. We realized that if Bob needed care, it would involve the whole family, including Isabella and her husband. John and I decided to call Isabella to discuss it, and we agreed to meet at Bob's house to talk about how we could help him once he was discharged from the hospital. As soon as we started discussing Bob's care, Isabella bluntly announced, "I'm not going to look after him," shocking both John and me. "What? If you're not going to, then what are we supposed to do?" I asked. "I don't care, you two can take care of him," she replied dismissively, fiddling with her perfectly manicured nails. Her husband, Tom, nodded in agreement. "What about a nursing home?" "What? Why would I waste money on that?" she snapped. I felt her glaring at me, as if I wasn't allowed to have a say, so I stayed quiet. John looked frustrated. "If he can't go to a facility and you won't look after him, then what are we going to do? That's why you two should take care of him. I'm not having an old, sick man in my house," Isabella said with a smirk. I lost my patience. "That's enough, Isabella. He's your father." "So what?" she said, unfazed. "Just because he's my father doesn't mean I have to look after him. Besides, he's John's father too. I've been saying you should look after him." There wasn't much we could say to that. John and I would have gladly cared for Bob, but our home isn't designed for someone with mobility issues. There are many stairs and uneven floors, and we don't have the money to remodel. "Mary, don't you have a caregiving certificate? Taking care of him should be easy for you, right?" Isabella asked, smiling smugly. John and I were both at a loss for words. We decided to end the discussion for now and left. "What are we going to do?" John asked, looking worried. "I don't mind caring for your father," I said gently, "but if we do, we'll need to make the house safe for him, and that's expensive. Medical equipment isn't cheap either." "You're right," John sighed. "I wondered if making our house suitable for Bob would cost around $100,000. That's just an estimate, but if we adjust the entire first floor to meet his needs, it might be close. With our eldest daughter still in college, we don't have that kind of money, and we're still paying off our mortgage. The thought of taking out another loan for renovations is overwhelming. I feel terrible, but should we consider a nursing home? The problem is, the waiting lists are long, and the fees are high, and I know Isabella and her family won't help financially. I couldn't see a clear solution. We decided I would talk to my father-in-law directly to get his opinion. When I went to visit him in the hospital, he looked much better and greeted me with a smile. "Sorry for all the trouble," he said, like he always does when I visit. "Don't say that. I brought one of your favorite books today," I replied, placing it on the table for him. After his stroke, he lost movement on the right side of his body, so he has to prop books up and use a weight to keep the pages from turning. "Thank you," he said, putting the book by his pillow. "Dad, I came because I wanted to talk about what comes next, I said. He gave me a warm smile. Oh, I know. I'll be okay even in a nursing home. I've saved up for it, so please don't worry. He tried to sound positive, but I noticed a hint of loneliness in his expression. Well, Dad, if you'd be comfortable, why not come live with us? I said, trying to cheer him up. I used to work in elderly care, and since I'm at home, I have the time, and John is there too. That's a kind offer, he said, looking surprised but touched. I could tell he felt he wouldn't be able to go back to his own house, where Isabella and her husband are now living. I imagined how they might treat him as a burden if he returned, and it made me sad. I'd originally planned to just listen to his thoughts and decide from there, but I ended up inviting him before even consulting John. I felt a bit guilty, but I knew John would understand. Now, we just needed to figure out the logistics of his care and, most importantly, the cost. With that in mind, I decided to try consulting Isabella one more time. I went home and told John what had happened at the hospital. He looked a bit concerned, but he seemed to understand and agreed, as if he'd already guessed it would come to this. Right then, John called his sister, Isabella. That's why we're asking for your help, since we'll be the ones looking after Dad, I overheard John say. They seemed to argue on the phone, with John sounding frustrated. Finally, he sighed and hung up. John explained that Isabella had refused to offer any financial help, and there was nothing more we could do about it. Determined to find a way, John and I started discussing how we could handle the costs ourselves. Our home became a bit hectic as we talked about remodeling for accessibility, figuring out what care supplies we'd need, and learning about different options for home care. Later, when I told my father-in-law he'd be living with us after he left the hospital, he looked both happy and a little apologetic. Mary, could you bring the checkbook from that bag over there? He asked during one of my visits. Curious, I did as he asked. Then he opened the bank book and handed it to me, saying, I have some money here, can you and John use it? The balance in his account was far more than I had ever imagined. When I just stared in surprise, my father-in-law laughed and said, You and John are going to be taking care of me now, right? I heard you're getting a new car and making the house accessible. Would $10 million be enough? $10 million. I was shocked. I had no idea he'd saved so much. Apparently, after my mother-in-law passed away, he hadn't felt like doing much, so he decided to put his energy into investments he'd been learning about for years. My father-in-law's investments had gone surprisingly well, and he saved money quickly. Since he wasn't a big spender, his savings just kept growing. Even with the cost of remodeling the house and getting a new car, he really didn't need all that money. I handed his bank book back and said, I can't accept this much, please keep it for yourself, but he held it out to me again, saying, I have more than I need, I'd rather give it to you and John, since you're willing to take care of me. After a bit of back and forth, I still felt uncomfortable accepting such a large sum. Seeing my hesitation, he thought for a moment, then suggested, what about $1 million? I managed to convince him to settle on a more modest amount, $100,000. He still seemed a bit disappointed, but he agreed. Just then, Isabella suddenly walked in, completely unaware of our conversation about the money. Quickly, I tucked my father-in-law's bank book back in its original place. Isabella frowned and asked, What's going on? Sounding slightly concerned, though it was clear she hadn't heard anything. It turned out she had just come to drop off some clothes for her father. I felt relieved she hadn't overheard our talk about the money. After chatting for a bit, Isabella and I left the hospital together. On the way home, she suddenly said she wanted to talk and suggested we stop by a coffee shop. Since her talks usually aren't pleasant, I was hesitant but agreed, which turned out to be a mistake. I'll take care of Dad, she announced out of nowhere. Her offer left me shocked, especially since we were already in the middle of preparing our home for him, even starting the renovations. Confused, I asked, Why now? She replied casually, So you don't need to visit him at the hospital anymore. Her response didn't make sense. There's no rule that only the caregiver should visit. Something about her sudden change didn't sit right with me, so I suggested we talk about it another time and left the cafe. When I told John about it at home, he thought it over and suddenly seemed to realize something. She must have overheard about Dad's savings, he said. It made sense. Otherwise, there was no reason for her to suddenly want to care for him after being so against it. We both suspected she'd found out about the money and was trying to gain his favor to inherit it. I worried she might even start making excuses to spend it on herself. But what should we do? I asked John. I have an idea. Let's let her give it a try, he replied with a sly grin, hinting that he had a plan. Although I felt uneasy, I decided to stay quiet and go along with Isabella's request for now. I explained to my father-in-law that he didn't need to worry about money and that his daughter Isabella would be taking care of him. He responded with a vague look, neither agreeing nor disagreeing. With that, our conversation ended, and he was discharged from the hospital and went back to his family home in Nebraska, where Isabella lived. After his discharge, I visited the family home. The house didn't seem prepared for proper caregiving. There were no renovations or adequate supplies. I doubted that real caregiving could happen under these conditions, but since Isabella had insisted, I kept quiet. 2 months later, I got a frantic call from Isabella. "Mary, I can't do this anymore. Please come over right now." I rushed to the house in Nebraska and found it in disarray, with a foul odor hanging in the air. Isabella looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes and an unsteady walk. "Are you okay?" I asked, worried. As I hurried over to her, she grabbed my hand and said, "Take him away." At first, I didn't understand, but after calming her down, she explained. She had completely underestimated the demands of caregiving, helping with walking, meals, and even managing his incontinence, which required changing diapers. It was all too overwhelming for her. I told her I couldn't make a decision right then, but promised to get back to her soon. Back at home, John wasn't surprised. "She lasted 2 months, that's impressive," he said, glancing at the calendar. He'd expected this outcome. He suggested we go pick up his father on his next day off, and I agreed. A few days later, when we arrived at the house in Nebraska, my father-in-law was already packed and ready to leave. I felt relieved that we could finally bring him home with us. As we were about to help my father-in-law into the car, Isabella suddenly said, "I've endured for 2 months, and I used to live here too, so I deserve at least $5 million. Her comment shocked me, and I stopped in my tracks. John also seemed taken aback and turned to look at her. She had a smug look on her face. "What are you talking about, Isabella? This isn't the time or place to talk about money, especially not in front of Dad. He raised us." John tried to reason with her, but it didn't seem to affect her. "I'm his daughter. It's only fair that I get paid," Isabella said defiantly. I couldn't believe how bold she was being. "Enough, Isabella, you shouldn't talk about such things, especially after you've already received money," I said, trying to stop her. My father-in-law, looking shocked, added, "There's none left, just $5 million. What's so hard about that?" I was stunned. How could she speak like this to her own father? Even John, usually calm, looked furious. His face was red as he glared at her. John tried to stay calm, but my father-in-law, Bob, spoke up to ease his son's anger. "It's okay, John, she's speaking the truth." Then, Bob turned to Isabella with a cold expression. "Isabella, you are no longer my child. Leave this house." His words were so harsh, and when Isabella heard them, she froze in shock. What are you talking about? I'm your only daughter," she exclaimed. "I only have one son, and this kind, caring woman here is my daughter-in-law. I don't know who you are anymore. Take your foolish husband and leave," Bob said firmly. I was shocked. This was the first time I'd ever heard my father-in-law speak so harshly. He was usually soft-spoken, but now his eyes were hard and unyielding. Isabella seemed stunned and didn't dare respond. "Well, shall we go? I'm counting on you moving forward," Bob said, his voice returning to its usual warmth as he looked at me with a smile. John and I followed his lead, leaving Isabella standing there, speechless. Later, Bob arranged through his lawyer to ensure his inheritance would go only to John, so none would go to Isabella. After Isabella moved out, leaving the house empty, Bob suggested that John and I move in, and we happily agreed. Isabella and her husband, it turned out, had been spending a lot of Bob's money even while he was healthy, and their careless spending had led them into debt. Now, they struggle to make ends meet. I can't help but feel this is the natural result of how Isabella treated her father. Taking care of Bob is challenging, but with my caregiving experience, it doesn't feel like a burden. Our family is able to enjoy a good relationship and a peaceful home life together.
Checking my phone, I discovered 13 missed calls, all from my mother-in-law Martha. Not again, I thought. As I pondered this, my phone vibrated once more. I answered, and Martha's voice, filled with anger, came through. "Excuse me, isn't the allowance for this month $3,000 due?" she demanded. "Excuse me," I retorted. I'll send the allowance once this month's payment is deposited. Martha raged, completely disregarding my circumstances and only expressing her own desires. I had enough of her. Even in this situation, she didn't reflect on her words and actions. I felt I had no choice but to resort to my last option. I pulled myself together and bled out to my phone. Your son has passed away, so I can no longer send the allowance. My name is Jennifer Smith, 32 years old. I'm a busy working woman at a major financial firm and also a housewife. I continued. I got married about 2 years ago. I met my beloved husband Mark through our shared hobbies. He was kind to everyone, and I was attracted to his warm smile, quickly developing feelings for him. Apparently, he felt the same way, and after dating for a year, we immediately got engaged. We both believed that we wouldn't meet anyone better than each other. We were living together while dating, and without any major quarrels, we decided to marry. Everything went smoothly for us, but here's where a problem arose. Martha, my mother-in-law. My father-in-law had passed away a few years ago, and since Mark didn't have any siblings, his only family was Martha. The trouble started when I first visited her home to introduce myself before our wedding. "Nice to meet you, Martha," I said, trying to be polite. She clearly showed a displeased expression. "So, you're Mark's fan, huh?" she said. "Yes, my name is Jennifer Miller." "You're a rather plain girl. I wonder what Mark sees in you," she remarked. I couldn't tell if she was joking or seriously meant what she said. Having such words directed at me by the mother of my loved one, I was quite shocked. Seeing my state, Mark frowned at Martha. "Hey, Mom, what's with the sudden harsh words? How can you say such things to the person I chose?" Mark questioned. "No, Mark. I'm just trying to choose a suitable woman for you," she replied. "Choose? I'm the one who chose her. You have no right to meddle. Don't say it in such a cold way. I'm just telling the truth because I care about you. If you were really thinking of me, you'd simply support us. Why can't you understand such a simple thing?" The air turned heavy as an argument unfolded between mother and son right before my eyes. Given that this was my first meeting with Martha, I wasn't in a position to intervene. Although the atmosphere remained awkward, we ultimately managed to express our intent to marry. As we were leaving, Martha called out to Mark, sounding somewhat disgruntled. "Mark, can I have a word? You're going to keep that promise after you get married, right?" "What promise?" Mark inquired. "You know about the allowance or that?" "Yes, I'll be sure to take care of that. Can we not discuss it here, please?" Mark seemed uncomfortable, and the atmosphere between my husband and his mother was tense, thick with discomfort in the car on the way home. I approached Mark to address the lingering concern that had been bothering me. "Hey, Mark, about the conversation you had with your mom as we were leaving," I began. Mark sighed deeply and began to speak slowly. "Yeah, I should have told you about it, Jennifer. I heard something about an allowance after my dad passed away. I've been sending money to my mom every month." "How much?" I asked. $22,000. $2,000? I couldn't help but raise my voice in surprise. Mark continued, "Actually, my mom has a debt. She lost a lot of money at a casino a long time ago. She's still paying it off, and because her health isn't great these days, she spends a lot of time at home. But she still needs money to live on." $2,000? Isn't that a bit too much?" I questioned. "If I try to lower the amount, she keeps calling me over and over, and no matter what, a mother is still a mother. I worry about her living alone." I understood that Mark was devoted to his mother. However, 2 months after our wedding, during my lunch break one day, I received a phone call from Martha. When I answered, she began to speak in a cheerful tone. "Jennifer, long time no see. Can we chat for a bit?" I hesitated before replying, "Yes, what can I do for you?" "You could start sending me money," she said. I was so taken aback that I couldn't find the words to respond. However, Martha seemed excited to continue the conversation. "You mentioned before that you're working for a financial company, right? That means you have a good salary, doesn't it?" she inquired. "Well, not exactly. I replied, avoiding eye contact. Are you lying to avoid giving me money? Martha's tone turned accusatory. That's not what I mean, I explained. But Martha, you're still receiving financial support from Mark, aren't you? In response to my question, Martha defiantly replied, so what? I stated what I felt. Martha, receiving $2,000 in monthly support is a big deal, and yet you're asking for more, really. Martha questioned, if you were to send me an additional $1,000, I could avoid burdening Mark. Confused, I asked, what do you mean by that? Martha elaborated, well, I have Mark as a guarantor for my debts. If I fail to make payments, the debt collectors will go after him. Do you understand? But aren't you using part of Mark's $2,000 to pay back the debt? I inquired. Martha admitted, I'm short. I haven't told Mark, but I have a significant amount of debt. From Martha's tone, it was apparent that this was a fact even her husband was unaware of. Having children in the future would increase our expenses. Additionally, taking over Martha's debt was not an easy task. If Martha's payments fell behind and the debt fell onto Mark, the interest would likely have accumulated significantly by that time. If I refused to send money, it would eventually become a problem for my husband as well. It was better for Martha to pay off her debt now. Thinking along those lines, I reluctantly agreed to Martha's proposal. All right, I'll start sending you money, I conceded. Martha seemed relieved, saying, really good, Jennifer. I knew you would say that. The total, with Mark's contribution, will be $3,000. But this means you can pay off your debt, right? Yes, of course. I should be able to pay it all off in about a year, Martha assured. I pressed, you promise, right? You'll make sure to pay off all your debts. Martha agreed, and I said, I get it, so I'll be expecting it from this month onwards. She ended the call abruptly. Physical exhaustion from work, combined with this emotional burden, only added to my stress. $1,000 a month was going to be rough, but it was also to prevent future problems for us. After all, if Martha couldn't make a living, it would upset Mark as well. That night, I promptly reported the matter to my husband. He listened attentively and said I didn't have to do this, but I had already given my word to Martha, and it was a decision made for our future well-being. Mark expressed his gratitude and understanding, even as he maintained a sorry expression throughout. Time flew by, and 2 years had passed since then. The financial aid we thought would end in a year was still ongoing, and even now, we were transferring $3,000 every month to Martha. What's more, about 2 months ago, Mark fell ill and has been unable to go to work. He's on sick leave, so he's receiving disability benefits, but it's a mere pittance compared to his previous salary. Last month, I managed to transfer $3,000 to Martha from my savings, but it would be very challenging if this situation continues. Unbelievably, Martha has not once come to visit her sick son. We'd have told her about his hospitalization, but she doesn't show up to see him and only contacts me to ask, "You're still sending the money, right?" I was so angry that I decided to confront Mark about the issue. Mark, don't you think it's wrong that Martha is only concerned about money, even though you're in such a state? We need to think seriously about what to do going forward, I said. Mark agreed, saying, yeah, I've been thinking the same thing. I don't want to put more strain on you, Jennifer. This month, too, she's been bombarding me with calls and messages, asking if we sent the money yet. Are you serious? How can she only think about money when her own son is sick? Mark showed his anger at his mother, his face slightly tense. Then, as if he had an idea, Mark exclaimed, "That's it," and wore a sly grin. What is it, Mark? I asked. Well, this is our last resort. I've come up with something good for my mom, Mark suggested. What Mark proposed was a plan I could never have imagined. Although it could be called inappropriate, it seemed to be the only way to make Martha understand. A few weeks later, Mark was discharged from the hospital. Martha didn't reply to any of our messages, so we didn't tell her about Mark's discharge in the last 2 weeks. Martha's relentless demands for money had reached a point of absurdity. It seemed pointless to continue sending funds to a mother who showed no concern for her son. While Mark and I were enjoying a cup of tea, my phone buzzed with a message. Upon checking, I found 13 missed calls from Martha. As I pondered this, my phone vibrated again, signaling another call from her. "Hello," I answered, turning on the speaker microphone so that Mark could hear. Martha started shouting immediately. "Listen, where's the $33,000 for this month?" "Excuse me, that's right. The money for this month hasn't been transferred yet," I replied. I began to explain Mark's situation, but she interrupted, showing no empathy. "I don't care if he's in the hospital or whatever. It's none of my business. You're working at a good place, right? You must have plenty of savings. Hurry up and transfer it here," Martha shouted angrily. Incredibly, she went on to say something outrageous. "Listen, since you married Mark, if you can't pay, you have to pay me. Understand? If you refuse, I'll make you the guarantor. Got it?" At that moment, something inside me snapped. She was openly displaying her desires without considering our situation at all. I had reached my breaking point. I firmly declare into my smartphone, "Mark has passed away. I can't send you any more money." At these words, Martha blurted out, baffled, "What?" Yes, this was the last resort that my husband suggested, to lie to Martha about Mark's death and observe her reaction. If she showed any sign of sadness, if she reflected on her behavior and apologized, we would continue to support her financially. But if she didn't reflect, if she demanded money, we would cut ties completely. Deep down, I thought that even a money-grubbing woman like Martha would deeply reflect on her actions if she were told that her own son had died. However, the very next moment, Martha burst into loud laughter. "Yay, what's so funny?" I asked. "Well, isn't it obvious? If Mark is dead, that means his inheritance will be distributed to me too. Excuse me, I've been looking into it since I heard that Mark was sick. Listen here, 2/3 of Mark's assets are yours, but 1/3 is mine." I was at a loss for words. I never thought that when she first heard her son was sick, she wouldn't look into treatment, but rather into how the inheritance would be divided. My anger surpassed. I was simply dumbfounded, and my husband appeared to feel the same way. As our eyes met, he slowly nodded, signaling to continue with the plan. I once again addressed Martha in a strong tone. "Martha, did you hear what I said? Mark is dead." "I heard. What about it? Aren't you sad your own son passed away before you?" She callously responded, "You just make sure to send me. I won't let you get away with not doing it," I exclaimed. However, with a click, the phone line was abruptly cut off, and a dial tone echoed. Glancing at my husband, I saw that he was visibly shaking with a face red with anger. "Mark, are you okay?" I asked. My husband looked into my eyes and said, "I'm cutting ties with her. She'll likely come here eventually, demanding my money. Let's wait until then, okay?" "But are you really okay with this? Cutting off ties just like that?" I inquired. "Yeah, I have no regrets. After that call, she's no mother," my husband replied, his eyes filled with hatred, and I felt the same way. A person who only thinks about money over her own son's life is not family to me. A few days later, as we expected, Martha came to our house. For the time being, I decided to hide my husband in the next room and deal with Martha myself. She approached me with a face like a demon. "Hey, give me Mark's inheritance right now," she demanded again. With that, anything else to say? He's already dead, isn't he? "It's pointless to say anything now," I retorted. "Yet you never even visited him. What are you saying? Are you really his mother? You're so annoying. Give me the inheritance right away. I don't mind dating a lawyer," Martha persisted. Speaking more would be a waste of time, I thought. Just as I thought that, my husband emerged from the next room. Seeing him, Martha let out a startled gasp, as if she had seen a ghost. "Mama." Mark said, "YW dead? Long time no, Mom, sorry, but the news about my death was a lie," Mark explained. "A lie? How could you be so disrespectful?" Martha responded, "I wanted to confirm your true nature, Mom. I was curious about how you'd handle the allowance if your son died, but you turned out to be a gold digger, just as I suspected. I got that perfectly, I added. What? How dare you call your mother a gold digger? Martha protested. Silence. I'm cutting ties with a toxic parent like you, Mark shouted. Martha's mouth was agape at my husband's angry shouts. She could not come to terms with the fact that her own son was severing ties with her. What? What does this mean, Mark? She stammered. It means exactly what I said. I can't consider someone like you as my mother. No way. What about the allowance? Martha asked, panicked. Do you really think I would? You're on your own with the debts. We're moving, Mark said firmly. Wait, please. If you do that, what about my living expenses? Martha tearfully pleaded, reaching out to my husband. He forcefully shook off her hand, looked at her coldly, and said, I don't care about your living expenses. You have been living off us without even a single apology. I really understand your despicable nature now. Don't you dare show up in front of us again. No, wait, Mark. Martha called out as my husband grabbed her arm and dragged her to the front door. He threw her shoes and bag outside and chased Martha out of the house. She made a fuss outside for a while but disappeared after a bit, perhaps unable to withstand the eyes of the neighbors. She tried contacting us multiple times, but we ignored all of her attempts. We set Martha's number to be automatically rejected, and we finished moving. Regarding the matter of co-signing for the debts, it became invalid since Martha had made Mark the co-signer without his consent, and therefore he was not responsible. Without the allowance from us, Martha seems to be leading a miserable life. It's only natural, as she had been using the allowance for her gambling habits instead of paying off her debts. She still has a mountain of debts and is chased by debt collectors every day. She can't gamble anymore and seems to be working from dawn to dusk. For the foreseeable future, it's unlikely that she will be able to pay off her debts completely. She will have to keep working until she is unable to move. This is entirely her own doing. As for us, we are spending fulfilling days in our new home. My husband's condition has stabilized, and he has returned to work. After some time, there's a new life growing in my belly. We're going to have an additional member in our family next year. From now on, we want to spend happy days as a family of 3.
I'm a 35-year-old office worker. My husband, Kevin, is 6 years older than me, and we've been married for 9 years. Right now, I'm living with my mom for some reasons. Let me explain how this happened. 4 years ago, Kevin and I built a house. At that time, Kevin had just changed jobs, and we didn't have much money saved or a high income. Kevin used to work for a big company, but his boss constantly bullied him secretly. This caused Kevin to have trouble sleeping, and eventually he couldn't go to work anymore. He saw a psychiatrist and took a 3-month break, but when he didn't get better, he quit his job. After that, we lived on just my salary. Kevin didn't work for 3 months, but slowly started to feel better. He began eating and sleeping well again, and his psychiatrist was happy with his quick recovery. My cheerful, loving Kevin was back. He then started looking for a new job. His experience at the big company helped, but finding a job was hard because he left his last job due to mental health issues. During this time, we found a small company that needed Kevin. The salary was about 3/4 of what he used to make, but he was happy to be working again. He said it was much better than being without a job, which made me happy. This job was also in a field he wanted to work in. We wanted to have children, but it was clear that life would be tough if I stopped working. So I continued working. I also loved my job, and we decided not to have children at that time. Our life was peaceful until my mother, Sarah, was paralyzed in a car accident and needed a wheelchair to get around. My dad had passed away when I was in middle school, and Sarah had been living alone since then. Our family home was old and not suitable for a wheelchair, with many steps. Kevin then said, "I'm worried. Let's live together." Sarah and I were surprised, but I appreciated Kevin's unexpected kindness. Since Kevin had just changed jobs, we were unsure about the future, but we decided to apply for a mortgage. As we expected, it was tough to get a loan because Kevin hadn't been at his job for long. However, we were determined and didn't give up. After trying with several mortgage companies, we finally found one that worked with us and approved our loan. We bought our dream home, which I had always imagined, filled with the smell of wood, thick wooden beams on the ceiling, custom storage spaces, a kitchen tailored for my height, and spacious cypress flooring. Importantly, it was a single-story, barrier-free house, perfect for living comfortably in a wheelchair. We were excited as our house was being built and visited the construction site every day. When our carefully designed home was finished, it had a large yard where my mom, who now rarely went outside, could enjoy sunbathing. However, there was a catch with the land. It was given to us by Kevin's grandfather, who adored Kevin. Kevin's family wasn't wealthy, but when his grandfather was diagnosed with cancer, he started to distribute his assets, giving us the largest plot of land. It felt like winning the lottery, but the land was just a 10-minute walk from Kevin's family home. When we told them my mother would be moving in with us, Kevin's sister laughed and said, "Why is your mother moving in too? How shameless is your family?" Kevin's mother told me that marrying someone different like me would bring trouble. She also harshly said it was terrible for her son to have to care for an old person and called me a curse. Even then, Kevin stood up for my mother and me. He said the land was a gift from his grandfather, and no one should complain. Kevin's mother and sister are really mean. It's amazing that Kevin, who is so kind, comes from that family. He's like a beautiful flower that grew out of mud. Kevin always says his family shows him how not to be. Kevin thinks his grandfather gave us the land because he wanted us to take care of his mother in her old age. He also gave other properties away. Kevin's sister got a parking lot that's a 10-minute walk from their home. It's smaller than our land but makes good money from parking fees. Honestly, I would have preferred that, but a gift is still a gift, and we are thankful. Thanks to my grandfather-in-law, we could build our house without paying for the land and used it to help get a loan. When the house was finished, we invited Kevin's mother and his sister's family over. The builders told us they had visited the house several times without asking us. They showed up late without apologizing and said, "This is kind of like Grandpa's house, so it's like our house too." Kevin's sister came in with muddy shoes and said the house smelled nice and didn't need air fresheners. She and her husband walked around with muddy shoes, ignoring the slippers we offered. When I suggested they use slippers, she laughed and said it was too much trouble and that we could just clean the floor. The visit was uncomfortable from the start, and they didn't bring anything with them. When they saw my mother's room, which is spacious and sunny, Kevin's mother said she would like that room. My mother's room is like a duplex with its own kitchen, almost a second living space. "I want to live here," said my mother-in-law. She then told my mother, "You were lucky to have that accident, weren't you? Thanks to being paralyzed, you moved from that old shack to this nice house. Isn't that a lucky turn of events?" My mother said nothing but looked very sad. I was really angry inside, but before I could say anything, Kevin spoke up. "What did you just say? There are things you should and shouldn't say. It makes me question your humanity. I can't even believe you're part of my family. You're the worst. Apologize now," Kevin demanded firmly. Whether they were amused or not, my mother and sister-in-law glared at me. Then my sister-in-law angrily asked Kevin, "What's this all about?" "It's a total turnoff. It's not cool to invite people over and then be rude to them. Just because you built a house, you think you can act superior." The mother-in-law chimed in, "My son messed up by marrying you. You're a jinx." Kevin didn't stay silent. "Enough is enough. This mess started because of your rude comments. You said the accident was a good thing and called my wife a jinx. I will not forgive that." The mother and sister-in-law looked frustrated by Kevin's strong response. Then my mother, who had been watching everything, said with regret, "It's okay. I am here because of the accident, and it's true I moved from a rundown house to this beautiful one. Your son has always been kind to me. Thank you." Perhaps feeling guilty, the mother and sister-in-law left, giving me a nasty look. My mother then apologized to Kevin. "I'm sorry if I upset your mother and sister. I'm sorry for ruining the mood at our housewarming party." Kevin responded, "No, I should be the one apologizing. It's embarrassing how they lack decency. I'm really sorry, but I am happy to be living with you. Please understand that." With that, my mother started to tear up. Since we live near Kevin's parents' house, the neighbors all know us well. They've known Kevin since he was a child and are very kind to us. 4 months have passed since that day. We were finally settling into our new home, and my mother started to smile more when I received an unexpected call from home while I was at work. We rarely get calls from home, so it surprised me. My bad feeling was right. My mom, sounding very upset, called to tell me something awful. Kevin had collapsed at work. I was shocked and spoke to my boss right away, then rushed to the hospital. On the way, I tried to stay calm by imagining that Kevin would be okay when I got there, joking around like always. But when I arrived, it was a shock to see him with so many tubes attached to him. We had planned to go to a movie that weekend. The doctor told me Kevin was in critical condition and might not wake up. I felt like I was in a movie. I couldn't even cry. Despite my prayers, Kevin passed away at the hospital. My shock continued as my mother and sister-in-law arrived when they heard Kevin had died. My sister-in-law accused me harshly, asking if I had poisoned him or if I was after his life insurance. My mother-in-law also blamed me, saying bad things always happen around me and calling me a jinx. I was too sad to respond. Then my own mother arrived in a care driver's taxi, crying over Kevin's death, which finally made me cry too. We both sobbed loudly. My mother-in-law rudely told us to stop the fake crying. She said Kevin had changed because of me and that she didn't want to see us ever again. Then she left the hospital. A funeral director came to organize Kevin's funeral, and we went to the funeral home. Kevin had died from a brain hemorrhage, which was hard to believe since he was fine that morning. When I told my mother-in-law the funeral plans, she coldly said she wouldn't come because Kevin always sided with my mother and me. She said her daughter wouldn't come either. Many of Kevin's coworkers and friends came to the viewing, but neither my mother-in-law nor my sister-in-law and her husband were there. Many attended the funeral, and it was clear that Kevin was deeply loved. Many people cried for him. It was hard, but maybe this is just the kind of people his family were. I was happy to spend the whole day with those who truly missed my husband. After Kevin's death, I got an email from my mother-in-law, but it was inappropriate, so I didn't reply. She was asking about the life insurance money and kept emailing because I didn't respond. Eventually, she claimed she had a right to it. I chose to ignore it because I wasn't ready to deal with that. When we got home, I noticed a light on inside, which was odd. My mother, Sarah, was confused and thought we had turned off all the lights. I figured maybe I forgot because I was so upset. I told her it was understandable given the situation, and I unlocked the door. When we entered, we could hear the TV, which was very strange. Inside, we found my sister-in-law and her husband sitting there. I was so shocked I couldn't even speak. The living room was full of unfamiliar furniture and boxes. We had no idea what was happening. My sister-in-law said, "Why did you just barge in here?" "Well, it's your first time, so I'll let it slide. We're taking this house. We sold your stuff, so leave." My mother and I were completely shocked. I asked where our furniture and belongings had gone, and she casually said a resale company came and took everything, claiming we had good furniture and they got a good price for it. They bought new furniture with that money, saying, "Who wants furniture that a dead person used? It's bad luck." She added that she cared about such things and our stuff was packed in boxes. She even remarked that we must be minimalists or just poor because we had so few things. The furniture was carefully chosen by my husband and me. I couldn't forgive them for this. My mom was furious too, her face turning beet red, but she was too shocked to respond. I immediately called the resale company. After explaining the situation, they agreed to treat the items as stolen and return them. Now that my husband is gone, dealing with this was the last thing I needed. I don't want anything to do with his family, but I do want to stay in a house that's full of memories of him. While I was wrestling with these feelings, my mother quietly said to me, "What do you think Kevin would say if he were here now?" "He might say we should leave. I'm sure he would." Kevin often mentioned it's good to spend time with people who understand you, but there are some people who will never understand no matter how much you try. It's a waste of time dealing with those people. He was actually talking about his own mother and sister. I realized that if we stayed, his family would keep interfering. Acting on impulse, I signed a lease for an accessible apartment. My mom was surprised by how quickly I made that decision. I asked the resale company to hold on to the furniture for a few days, and it was moved to our new apartment 3 days later. In exchange for moving out, I made my mother-in-law and sister-in-law promise to cut ties with us. So a new life began for just my mother and me in the apartment. It turns out Kevin had many life insurance policies, almost obsessively so. He used to joke always with a smile, "When I die, you guys will be rich." True to his word, he left enough money for my mother and me to be comfortable for the rest of our lives. Since he couldn't secure a mortgage when we bought the house, I, being employed at a major corporation, bought the house in my name. I made sure that even if something happened to Kevin first, I wasn't going to keep paying a mortgage for a house I wouldn't live in. According to our agreement, the house would be auctioned off if the mortgage wasn't paid for 4 months. Time flew by, and 4 months passed quickly. Then I started receiving a lot of calls from my sister-in-law, Emily, and my mother-in-law, Maria. My call history was filled with their names, and it was getting scary, like something out of a horror movie. They were incredibly persistent. So I finally answered the phone. They were furious because the house was being sold. Apparently, when they tried to return, they found out they couldn't get in because of a seizure notice. Emily and her husband had moved out of their apartment since Kevin passed away, and Emily had also quit her job. I suggested they move back into their parents' house since they were panicking about suddenly being homeless. Surprisingly, Maria had gotten so caught up in gambling that she couldn't keep up and had sold her own house. It turns out they had been living together for the past 5 months. I also heard that they sold their main source of income, a parking lot in front of the train station, a long time ago. Now, Maria and Emily's family are completely homeless. When Maria said, "I'm sorry for everything. Let's get along. Can you lend me some money, please?" I replied, "I think it's best if you stay away since I'm a jinx. We're strangers now that we severed ties." Maria was quiet after mumbling weakly. In my mind, I was thinking, who's the real bad luck charm here? Then when I said I wouldn't lend them a single cent, Emily, who had been listening next to Maria, shouted, "You devil. Bring us the money right now." I replied, "I am a devil and bad luck, so I'm going to hang up now," and ended the call. In reality, I involved a lawyer for the past 5 months to push for the auction of the house. I thought it was an unusual case, but apparently, it's not that uncommon. The house was sold without any major issues, giving our family a moment of peace. We plan to find a new home with the money Kevin left us. Since it's just my mother and me, we don't need a big house. We'd rather prioritize security as 2 women living together. So I chose a condominium with minimal noise disturbance. I remember something my husband always said when we built our home. People can get energy from the sun, so let's create a place where your mother can enjoy her hobby of reading in the garden without feeling self-conscious. With those words, he had made a spacious courtyard for her. So I looked for a condo with a large balcony where she could enjoy her coffee and read. It's smaller than our previous home, but the room is spacious enough to house the furniture my husband probably chose. The piece of land that was gifted to us by Kevin's grandfather was expansive, and the house sold for more than expected. With that money, we're moving forward. I recently bought a luxurious condominium with exceptional security features, a choice I'm sure would have comforted my always cautious husband, Kevin. The peace of mind that comes from living in such a secure place is invaluable, especially after the tumultuous experiences with my in-laws. Life has taken a dramatic turn since Kevin passed away. Amidst my grief, I've been dealing with the fallout from his family's actions, which frankly has been draining. Following the auction of the house, Kevin's mother, Maria, and his sister found themselves without a place to live. Despite their desperate attempts, including trying to borrow money from neighbors, they couldn't secure any financial assistance and ended up in public housing. Living in public housing, they continued their old habits, causing disturbances that have started to concern the community. For instance, they recently had a barbecue on their small balcony, an act that left many locals in disbelief given the limited space and safety concerns. Such thoughtlessness seems typical of them and reflects the disregard they've always shown for others' comfort. Moreover, their financial difficulties appear to have led to frequent loud arguments that disrupt the nightly peace, an auditory testament to their ongoing strife. My sister-in-law's husband has since left, leaving just her and Maria to fend for themselves. Their situation is a stark contrast to the quiet, stable life I now lead with my mother. We're both 2-person households, but while my home is a sanctuary, theirs is a source of constant conflict and unease. It's become so disruptive that neighbors are banding together, hoping to evict them to restore some semblance of peace. It's a harsh reminder that no matter where you go, being a nuisance can make you unwelcome. Reflecting on these events, I realize how the phrase, "what goes around comes around," rings true. My goal is to live quietly and peacefully, distanced from the embarrassing turmoil associated with my former family. I believe Kevin watches over us, perhaps with mixed feelings about the chaos his family continues to perpetuate in contrast to the tranquility he loved during his life. As I move forward, my focus is on living a life that causes no trouble to others. I want to honor Kevin's memory not just through words but through actions. He always advocated for a life well lived, surrounded by people who bring joy and understanding. Despite the unfortunate family dynamics he left behind, I'm committed to building a life filled with positivity and peace. The decision to buy this condominium wasn't just about finding a new home. It was about creating a haven where my mother and I could feel safe and secure. The quiet, the order, and the absence of drama allow us to enjoy each other's company and focus on the things that truly matter. It's smaller than our previous house, but every corner of this new space is cherished, every moment of silence savored. I've learned a lot about resilience and moving forward. The memories of Kevin, filled with love and laughter, inspire me every day. They remind me of the importance of living authentically and compassionately, ensuring that his spirit of kindness is carried forward. Living well is perhaps the best tribute I can offer to a man who gave so much and asked for so little in return. In this new chapter, amidst the serenity of our chosen sanctuary, I am determined to live not just for myself, but in a way that would make Kevin proud.
When I ventured into a town I seldom visited for shopping, I stumbled upon a disconcerting sight. My husband and mother walking arm in arm, sharing intimate kisses without a hint of concern for onlookers. Overwhelmed with shock, I confronted them, only to find them unapologetic, even justifying their actions. Swiftly, I divulged the shocking revelation to my father and opted for a divorce. However, life took an unexpected turn after my father's demise, leading me to cross paths with my mother and ex-husband once again. Years had passed, and as I laid eyes on my mother, her visibly pregnant belly spoke volumes. Catching my gaze, she smirked in triumph. "Ah, you've noticed. There's a little one growing in here. It seems like you've been yearning for this for quite a while, struggling with infertility. Well, we managed to achieve it effortlessly. Now I can finally embrace fatherhood." The decision to part ways had been a wise one. They aimed to hurt me with insults, but to their dismay, I remained impervious to their attempts. "That's quite amusing. The two of you look utterly foolish together," I remarked, laughter bubbling within me. My name is Emily, a 24-year-old office worker, born to young parents entangled in a whirlwind romance. My parents, Linda and Ken, married hastily due to my arrival during their high school years. Initially, their union appeared promising, with my father actively involved in my early years. However, a workplace accident left him physically impaired, triggering a drastic change in my mother's demeanor. As my father struggled with rehabilitation, my mother's indifference and disdain for him became evident. She spewed insults and mockery, creating a strained environment. Despite financial challenges, my father's perseverance allowed him to walk again, but my mother's coldness persisted. Growing up, my mother vented her discontent about my father, creating a rift between them. Our family struggled financially, and my mother's night shifts left me primarily under my father's care. Graduating from high school, my dreams of college were dashed by my mother's insistence that I work to support the family. "I'm sorry, Emily. My condition has forced this life upon you. Don't apologize, Dad. I'm content if it eases your burden." After years of hard work, I married Michael, hoping to create a warm family unlike my parents' strained relationship. However, the joy turned to frustration when conceiving proved elusive, and Michael shifted the blame entirely onto me. "I wanted kids too, But it seems you're the issue. Why can't we have children? Desperate, I suggested seeking medical advice, but Michael stubbornly blamed me and refused infertility treatments. As my efforts to conceive faltered, suspicions arose about his fidelity, fueled by late-night returns with the scent of perfume lingering on his clothes. The journey that began with familial betrayal had woven into a tale of personal resilience and strength. Further scrutiny of the credit card statements unveiled unexplained expenditures, deepening my suspicions. Direct confrontation with my husband seemed fruitless, anticipating his evasion of the inquiry. The opportune moment to address my concerns emerged during an unexpected visit to a town I rarely frequented for shopping. Spotting my husband, who claimed to be working that day, walking with a woman by his side stirred curiosity. Is that Michael? He was supposed to be working today, I mused, ready to call out to him. My surprise intensified when I identified the woman accompanying him. It was my mother. Since marrying, I had maintained distance from her, seldom bringing my husband to my parents' house. Observing them discreetly, my astonishment peaked as they held hands and kissed. Unable to contain my shock, I confronted them, chasing after the unexpected duo. "Hey, Michael." "Mom." Caught off guard, they halted, feigning surprise. My mother attempted to downplay the situation, claiming they merely ran into each other and exchanged pleasantries. Approaching my mother, I discerned a familiar scent, one I had encountered on my husband's clothes after his late-night returns. Reluctantly, I concluded that my mother was his clandestine partner. "Don't lie, I saw it. You and Michael kissing." Their denials crumbled under the weight of my revelation. Admitting their deceit, my mother revealed her involvement with Michael. "Huh, you must be mistaken. We just happened to bump into each other, that's all." "I didn't think we'd be found out so soon," she protested. Their web of deception unraveled further as my husband confessed his preference for older women, specifically naming my mother Linda. "Sorry, Emily. I did feel bad for you, but I've liked Michael since we first met," my mother confessed, laying bare the painful betrayal. My mother and husband shamelessly confessed to shocking revelations. It was just a chance encounter, and things unfolded while having tea. "I'm young and crave love experiences," my husband admitted unabashedly. With our marriage already strained, talking to Linda intensified my attraction towards her, he confessed. Acknowledging the information, my mother addressed our fertility struggles, adding, "Michael desired a boy, and unfortunately, because of you." Unable to comprehend the depths of their betrayal, I confronted them about divulging our private matters to my mother. "You talked about our issues with my mom? It's true, isn't it? You blame me for not having kids." Incredibly, my husband had aired our intimate struggles to my mother, portraying himself as the victim. Anger surged within me, realizing the impossibility of sustaining this marriage. "You're the worst. Do you even realize what you've done?" I yelled at the pair, exhausted by their feeble justifications. "I can't help it. Your failure as a wife and a woman led to this," he retorted callously. "Well, I don't mean a husband like you." Seeking liberation, I declared, "I want a divorce. I've grown tired of your constant excuses and inability to have kids. It'll be a relief to be free of a useless wife like you." Apologizing insincerely, my mother remarked, "I didn't mean to, but it seems like taking your precious husband away. My bad." Unmoved by her false remorse, I issued a warning. "If I disclose this affair to Dad, your divorce is imminent. Brace yourself." My mother's demeanor shifted at the revelation, but she swiftly regained her composure. "Well, there's no concrete evidence of our affair. Your divorce with Michael is your business. I'll divorce when I feel like it. Let's go," she declared, prompting Michael to hastily abandon me. Despite their evident infidelity, my mother displayed no urgency in divorcing my father. In stark contrast, I promptly headed to my parents' house and disclosed everything to my father. "So that's what's been happening, huh? I endured that woman for years, thinking it would be better for you to have a mother. I never expected her to be this terrible to her own daughter." My father expressed his disappointment with a bitter glance. I've decided to divorce Michael. I can't stay married after what happened. What about Mom? I inquired. Don't worry. I have a plan. I won't let them have their way, my father assured. Later, Michael sent the completed divorce forms, which I signed, formalizing our separation. My mother, however, never returned home, apparently eloping with Michael. Despite the frustration, my father advised me to let go of them both, and I chose to move on from my ex-husband and my mother. Leaving the apartment I shared with Michael, I returned to my parents' house. Ironically, my father had become adept at taking care of himself, thanks to my mother's lack of assistance. Though the outcome was unfortunate, I found solace in returning to my roots. It's good to be living with you again, Emily. Thank you for coming back, my father expressed his gratitude. A fleeting period of tranquility with my father was abruptly disrupted by his contraction of the prevalent pneumonia, thrusting him into a perilous struggle between life and death. Emily, I've burdened you greatly, and I'm sincerely sorry. Live your life as you see fit. My father, teetering on the edge of consciousness, tightly held my hand and imparted those parting words. I tearfully nodded in response. Despite concerted efforts to combat the illness, his health deteriorated rapidly, leading to his eventual demise. Dad, I can't fathom your sudden departure. I wish I had been there more for you. I lamented while grappling with the preparations for his funeral. In the midst of my grief, an unwelcome pair arrived unannounced at our doorstep. A long time no see. Heard he died. My mother, and to my dismay, my ex-husband Michael stood there, their faces adorned with disagreeable smiles. They intruded with a brazen sense of entitlement. Why are you here? Leave. Who do you think you are? I am his wife. It's only natural for a wife to be present when her husband passes, my mother asserted. How dare you say that after abandoning us for years? Ah, yes, say what you want. Regardless of your objections, I am his wife. That entitles me to the inheritance. Wasn't there insurance? Disgusting. So, you never divorced Dad for this reason. Reflecting on my father's journey, despite lacking formal education and retiring from construction work due to injuries, he ascended to a respected position in a later joined company. His perseverance, honed during his time as a craftsman, endeared him to colleagues. My mother's decision to abstain from divorce now seemed strategic, securing a share of his hard-earned legacy. Now let's discuss the division of property. Knowing him, he wasn't driven by material desires, so I'm aware he saved up quite a sum, my mother suggested, pushing the conversation forward. It was then that I noticed something peculiar about her. She was dressed in maternity clothes, and her belly was notably large. Catching my gaze, she chuckled triumphantly. Oh, you've noticed. Yes, I'm carrying Michael's child. Unlike you, Emily, who couldn't conceive. We succeeded right away. Breaking up with you was truly the best decision. Now I can finally become a father. They proceeded to hurl hurtful insults, attempting to inflict maximum pain. Yet their efforts proved futile. I remained unaffected. That's amusing. Both of you look so foolish together, I laughed, holding my stomach, as they stared dumbfounded. What's so funny? This is just ridiculous. But are you certain that child is truly Michael's? My question irritated Michael, but my mother's composure wavered. Her eyes darted around, revealing a visible unease, though Michael remained oblivious. It's undoubtedly my child. Don't make baseless accusations out of bitterness. Yes, exactly. No need to be bitter. We'll see if it's baseless once you see this. Stepping away, I returned with the document in hand, presenting it to them. What's this all about? What? Why are you so surprised? It can't be that significant. What's the meaning of this? Both were taken aback by the document. A detective agency's investigation report summarizing my mother's social interactions. After my mother eloped with Michael, I coincidentally spotted her in the city. However, she wasn't with Michael, but with a young man I didn't recognize. Following them discreetly, they entered a hotel together. What does this mean? Could it be that Mom is? Having consulted with my father during his lifetime, I opted to investigate my mother's behavior, sensing its potential usefulness. The detective agency's findings confirmed my suspicions. My mother was deeply entangled with a man other than Michael. As Michael read the document with disbelief, he cast accusing glares at my mother standing beside him. "What on earth? Were you deceiving me? This is absurd. Emily is lying. The child in my belly is undoubtedly yours." Despite her flustered state, my mother vehemently insisted that the baby was Michael's. "Whom do you believe, Emily or me?" "Oh, that's convenient. Accusing your own mother just because you couldn't have children. What a terrible woman." Michael, swayed by my mother, regained his composure. They dismissed the report as false and resumed blaming me. "Believe what you want, but unfortunately, there's concrete evidence. You can come out now." Summoning someone from the next room, a man entered. "Who's that? I don't know him." Both were puzzled by the appearance of the unfamiliar man. "This is my husband. You wouldn't know him, of course, because after you, I remarried him. His name is Tom. I met him through a friend a year after divorcing Michael and remarried him. How does this man prove anything? Unlike with you, I am genuinely pregnant with this child. So what? Speak plainly. Don't you get it? I couldn't conceive with you, no matter how hard we tried, but with Tom, I got pregnant right away." The implication of my words dawned on Michael, and his eyes widened. "You avoided going to the clinic because it was a hassle. But I had tests done, and there were no issues with my fertility, so the problem was with you. That's a lie. But it's strange, isn't it? Supposedly, you have infertility issues, yet my mother is pregnant. Are you sure that baby is yours?" Confronted with my question, Michael couldn't argue back and turned his glare towards Linda beside him. "Hey, tell me the truth." "Ah, fine. You win. You admitted it rather quickly. I thought you'd deny it more. Being with you, Michael, was just a game for me." "What do you mean? I was with you because you were Emily's husband, you know, coveting what someone else had. But my true love was another man. I was planning to leave you soon anyway." Stunned by her words, Michael was left without a response. I intended to enjoy this game until I got caught. Well, it doesn't matter whether or not I'm carrying his child. My right to the inheritance remains unchanged. You're still fixated on the inheritance? Unfortunately, you'll have to abandon that notion. What? How many times do I have to say it? I never divorced your father, so I have a right to the inheritance. That's what I've been trying to tell you. There's no such right because you and Dad were divorced long ago. That can't be. Maybe you've forgotten because of your age, but Dad had the divorce papers you already filled out. When I reported my mother's affair to my father, he revealed a completed divorce form. Apparently, he had kept it without filing it because of me. But before he passed away, he used that form to divorce my mother. So Linda, you won't get a single penny of Dad's estate. Do you understand now? That can't be. At my words, my mother, who had been smug until then, turned pale. Michael continued glaring at her. I'm going home." Realizing her affair was exposed and that she would not receive any inheritance, my mother fled as if running away. Later, my mother did give birth to a boy, but it was clear without even needing a DNA test that he was not Michael's child. I never thought you'd be such a jerk. He abandoned my mother, who failed to secure any inheritance, and disappeared. The man who was my mother's main affair partner also ran away upon learning of her pregnancy, as their relationship was apparently just a casual fling for him. In the end, my mother became a single mother at 40, left to raise a young child on her own without anyone to rely on. She is raising her son on welfare. The care of a small boy at her old age is physically demanding, and she has aged significantly. I once saw my mother with her son from a distance. With increased gray hair, she looked more like a grandmother than a mother. Meanwhile, I gave birth to a healthy girl, and now our family of 3 lives happily. Ironically, the child my mother gave birth to is my half-brother, and he will be in the same grade as my daughter, making our family situation quite complicated. On the anniversary of my father's death, we planned to visit his grave as a family of 3. The betrayal by my ex-husband and mother was painful, but it led me to gain an irreplaceable family. Surely he's watching over us from heaven, right? My Father in heaven. He must also be delighted with the birth of his granddaughter. With the love he gave us in our hearts, we vowed to continue walking closely as a family. Are you the reserved guest I was expecting? I have something important to discuss with you. Would you mind sparing a moment? As I was about to enter the restaurant, a woman in a chef's attire, wearing a tense expression, approached me. Intrigued, I wondered what she wanted to confirm regarding my meal. However, when I listened to her, I was hit with a shocking revelation that made me go pale. My name is Emily Thompson, 31 years old, working in the advertising industry. I work diligently to create better advertisements, and although it's a challenging job, it's incredibly rewarding. My husband, John, whom I met through work, is a year older than me, and we've been married for a year. Being a dual-income household, we efficiently share our household chores and help each other manage our lives. Initially, our interactions were solely work-related, but as time went by, we started having more personal conversations and grew closer. I realized that we shared similar interests and values, and I started developing feelings for him. Fearing that we might not see each other often after our collaborative project was coming to an end, I mustered the courage and confessed my feelings to him. Despite my nervousness, he accepted my feelings, and we started dating. After a year, he proposed, and we got married. Before marriage, John revealed that he had been previously married and was divorced. They were married for about a year, had no children, and mutually decided to part ways due to differing values. It seemed like John regretted not being able to make his previous marriage work. He appeared a bit reserved when it came to love, probably because of his past experience, but I understood. As long as there were no lingering issues, I didn't mind his past. It wasn't about wanting happiness for marriage, but wanting to live my life alongside John. So I accepted the fact that John was divorced and went ahead with the wedding. Our married life was filled with happiness, but slowly, the real implications of John being divorced began to unravel. After our wedding, we moved to an apartment close to both our workplaces, and John's parents live nearby, and we get along well. Our married life has been smoother than I anticipated. Initially, I had concerns about living so close to my in-laws, fearing potential conflicts, but they were always kind to me. Given our work schedules, John and I hardly have time during the weekdays, but we make the most of our weekends. Living with my husband, due to both of us working, we don't get much leisure time together on weekdays, except for brief conversations at dinner. Therefore, we spend a lot of time together on weekends. We both enjoy eating and often cook dishes we want to try at home. Ideally, dining out would be great. But I have an allergy to fruits from the Rosaceae family, so I can't casually eat out. Even when I think a dish doesn't contain these fruits, they might be used as a hidden ingredient, making it tedious to constantly check with restaurants. Even a slight touch causes my skin to turn red and swell. I feel bad asking about ingredients at restaurants and have developed an aversion to dining out due to this. I developed this allergy as an adult, and initially, I was taken aback since I hadn't expected it. I recall a time when I ate a lot of strawberries, and my mouth swelled up, making it difficult to breathe. I used to eat fruits frequently, and after getting tested at the hospital, I was devastated to find out about my Rosaceae fruit allergy. Discovering that I could no longer eat favorites like strawberries, apples, pears, and peaches saddened me. I'd had reactions after eating food I thought was safe, only to find out they contained allergens, which further discouraged me from dining out. This made me apprehensive about buying ready-made meals or snacks, adding a bit of stress to my life. Perhaps due to the initial severe allergic reaction and the sadness of not being able to eat my favorite fruits, I became overly cautious about checking ingredients during meals with my husband. While we were dating, my constant checks made me feel apologetic. However, I can't feel at ease without thorough confirmation, and without it, I can't fully enjoy meals. Still, we love eating. My husband and I would select ingredients and enjoy cooking together, a routine that helped reduce my excessive worries. Fortunately, both my husband and his parents understood my allergies, easing the mental burden I felt after getting married. Especially my mother-in-law, who had a deep understanding of allergies due to her father's severe wheat allergy. Wheat is commonly used in many products, and even a little bit affected him. Allergies can be lethal, so we were very careful. She explained that she researched my allergy and always ensured that meals were safe for me when we dined at her place or went out. She took extra precautions, allowing me to enjoy meals without worries. You shouldn't have to be scared during meals. I'll make sure everything is safe for you, she told me, which almost moved me to tears. I have a great relationship with my in-laws, especially my mother-in-law, who treats me like her own daughter. We'd often go out together, and my husband and his parents are wonderful people. The concerns I initially had about my allergies have vanished. One day, a project I proposed at work was successful, earning me a promotion, which I excitedly shared with my family. They were all thrilled, especially my mother-in-law. While spending time with her, she invited me to celebrate at an upscale restaurant. That's a very fancy place, isn't it? I can't let you do that, I hesitated. The restaurant was in a luxurious hotel nearby, which I had always dreamt of visiting since my student days. However, it was truly upscale, and I felt it was too extravagant even for a celebration. You don't have to hold back. This is such a joyous occasion. Let me treat you, she insisted, genuinely happy about my promotion. Her sentiment warmed my heart, but I had reservations. I remembered visiting the restaurant's website before my allergy developed and dreaming of tasting their fruit-filled tart someday. The restaurant often uses fruits from the rosacea family. While I appreciate my mother-in-law's kindness, besides the issue of the restaurant being upscale, I'm hesitant because they frequently use fruits from the rosacea family, to which I'm allergic. Whenever I dined out with my mother-in-law in the past, we informed the restaurant of my allergy beforehand. But each time, I felt guilty asking them to accommodate my dietary restrictions. So, we often chose restaurants that seldom use my allergenic foods. I worry that even if we inform this restaurant about my allergy, it might inconvenience them due to their frequent use of fruits. Of course, dishes without these fruits are safe for me, and I'm tempted to try them. However, considering the kitchen likely processes these fruits as well, the risk scares me. In the end, I decided to decline the offer because of my concerns about an allergic reaction. Still, my mother-in-law was keen on the idea. I'll inform them about the allergy when I make the reservation. Don't worry. I also have a connection there, so they'll take good care of us. I was surprised to hear that she had connection to the restaurant, given that neither she nor my husband had ever mentioned it. However, I assumed it wasn't something she boasted about. Considering my mother-in-law's enthusiasm and my genuine interest in the restaurant's cuisine, we decided to have lunch there together. Given that it was a suggestion from my mother-in-law, who had always been considerate of my allergies, I felt relieved, thinking there was nothing for me to worry about. When I told my husband about this, he was surprised to hear that his mother had connections at the restaurant. He'd also mentioned that the restaurant sometimes serves fruit, and he appreciated their consideration for allergies. When I shared with my husband that my mother-in-law had informed the restaurant about my allergies during the reservation, and that they would take precautions, he seemed relieved. It's a celebration of your promotion, right? Make sure to enjoy yourself, he said with a laugh. Initially, I declined because of my allergies, but I had always admired the restaurant, so I was excited about dining there on the day I had been eagerly waiting for. Since it was a weekday, I took a half day off after finishing my morning work. I planned to head straight to the restaurant. Being a high-end place, I chose a more formal outfit than usual and paid extra attention to my appearance. When going to work, Colleagues noticed my attire and asked about my plans. When I told them about the meal, they wished me a good time before I left the office excitedly. As I entered the hotel entrance, my mother-in-law was already there. The two of us headed to the restaurant on the first floor, and since we had a reservation, we were immediately escorted to our table. Our reservation was for 1:00 p.m., but due to the busy lunchtime, we were informed that the serving might be a bit delayed. Understanding the popularity of the high-end restaurant, I decided to order just drinks for the time being and wait patiently. Having already finished work and being encouraged by my mother-in-law, I ordered champagne. We enjoyed our conversation while waiting for our meal. Though I've had champagne before, the one I had that day tasted the best. Feeling the effects of the alcohol and the anticipation of dining at a restaurant I had longed for, I was in high spirits. From the dishes at the neighboring tables, I could tell the food looked delicious, and I eagerly awaited our meal. Suddenly, my phone rang from inside my bag. Realizing I hadn't turned it off during my meal with my mother-in-law, I tried to shut it off. Seeing the incoming call was from work, I sobered up immediately, worried that there might be a problem. I excused myself from my mother-in-law and stepped out of the restaurant to take the call, ensuring no one was around in case of sensitive information. The call was regarding a document I had submitted earlier that day. My colleague urgently needed clarification. Relieved that it wasn't because of an error on my part, I answered their questions and wrapped up the call in about 5 minutes. As I was about to turn off my phone to go back and enjoy my meal, an unfamiliar woman approached me. "Excuse me, you're the customer who made a reservation for today's meal at the restaurant, right?" The woman was dressed as a chef, presumably from the restaurant's kitchen. She looked rushed and a bit out of breath with a concerned expression. I wondered why she would come out during such a busy time. I was puzzled, but when she said she needed to confirm something, I answered her questions. Her face went pale, and she urgently told me to leave the hotel immediately. "It's dangerous to go back to the restaurant now. Please leave the hotel and ensure your safety immediately." Suspicious of the woman's intense demeanor, I asked for clarification. Once I grasped the situation, I felt the blood drain from my face. I quickly hopped into a taxi waiting in front of the hotel and headed home. That evening, my mother-in-law called. When I picked up, she was furious about me leaving her at the hotel and returning home without saying anything, causing embarrassment. Since she had reserved a special course, you had everything set up to celebrate, and you just leave without a word. Don't you know basic manners? What kind of upbringing did you have? She was angry in a way I had never seen from my mother-in-law before, and she started to berate me. I had always thought of my mother-in-law as a kind and gentle person, but there was no trace of that now. I believed that the kind mother-in-law I had known would be upset if I left without saying anything, but would also be concerned about whether something had happened to me. However, she was furiously yelling with such intensity that I began to believe the rumors about her were true. As I remained silent, she continued to berate me further, complaining even about my parents and how they raised me. "You've been silent this whole time. Don't you realize you've done something wrong? You're not fit to be my son's wife." After a long tirade, she finally seemed to calm down a bit. I then quietly posed a question to her. "You told me that you informed the restaurant about my allergies when you made the reservation today, and I could relax, right? But the restaurant wasn't aware of my allergies, so what happened? In fact, the meal today had ingredients that I was allergic to, not only in the dessert but also in the main courses. The allergenic ingredients were used in marinades and sauces, which weren't apparent from just looking." The woman who approached me earlier had taken the reservation call from my mother-in-law, and she said that no mention of my allergies had been made. However, she noticed the allergy badge on my bag and came to check just in case. Being the chef responsible for our meal that day, she immediately noticed the inclusion of the allergenic ingredients. If she hadn't informed me, I would have unknowingly consumed the food with allergens, which would have resulted in a severe allergic reaction. Initially, I doubted that my mother-in-law would purposely make me consume allergens, but considering the woman took time out of her busy schedule to inform me, I quickly believed her. Furthermore, this woman knew about my mother-in-law's true nature, and she deduced my situation, advising me to leave immediately and ensure I went somewhere my mother-in-law would follow. The reason she knew my mother-in-law was that she was my husband's ex-wife, now working under her maiden name, Kate Young. Seeing me with my mother-in-law, she realized I was the new wife and decided to help me out. She assumed I was the new wife because she believed that my mother-in-law wouldn't have female friends, especially someone of a similar age, after getting married to my husband. The ex-wife lived with his parents and was subjected to significant mistreatment by my mother-in-law before they married. She, like me, thought the mother-in-law was gentle and kind, which left her quite baffled once they started living together. When my husband or father-in-law wasn't around, the ex-wife faced continuous criticism for her housework and was always subjected to snide remarks. Being a full-time housewife, she had no escape despite her culinary skills, honed from attending a professional cooking school. The mother-in-law still found faults with her dishes, even discarding them at times. She considered discussing this with her husband. But the mother-in-law was adept at concealing her true nature, especially around him. Feeling her complaints would fall on deaf ears, the ex-wife aimed to gather evidence. However, as she had recently become a full-time housewife, she lacked funds and was almost constantly under the watchful eye of the mother-in-law. Unable to gather proof and without anyone to confide in, she felt trapped in this life, so she fled in the form of a divorce. Despite never having worked before, she utilized her culinary license to seek employment and was lucky to land a job at the restaurant. She worked diligently, and over time, the memories of her mistreatment faded, and she began to enjoy her work. After a few years, as she matured into a full-fledged chef, for some reason, my mother-in-law discovered she worked there and started frequenting the restaurant. Upon realizing her ex-daughter-in-law was there, she discreetly threatened her for discounts while she declined absurd demands. Past traumas influenced her to yield to some, and the connection my mother-in-law spoke of referred to the ex-wife. When I questioned why she hadn't communicated my allergies to the restaurant, my mother-in-law feigned ignorance. "I knew about your allergies, so I must have told them." "Maybe it's the staff's oversight," she countered defensively, placing the blame on the restaurant staff. Given that the reservation call was handled by the ex-wife, it's probable that my mother-in-law deliberately didn't mention the allergies, intending to pin the blame on the restaurant. However, I was already onto her game, considering the restaurant's stringent guidelines on allergies. If informed, they'd have accommodated my dietary needs. Moreover, they record calls for dispute resolutions, so it would be easy to verify who was at fault. When confronted with this, my mother-in-law, not anticipating recorded evidence, fell silent. I pressed on. "You've always been cautious about my allergies. Why did you not mention them this time?" Until now, my mother-in-law was well aware of the dangers of allergies and always showed concern, so I never imagined she'd do something like this. She knew that by doing this, it wouldn't end well for me, given that we had a good relationship until now. I was curious why she acted this way and sought an explanation. After a brief silence, she shouted defiantly, "I despise you. You outshine me. You deserve some pain." She was envious since I received praise at work and was more liked in the neighborhood than her. She arrogantly claimed that even if I spoke out, no one would believe me. If it weren't for this incident, I wouldn't have believed she was capable of such actions. Thus, I had collected evidence to reveal her true nature and confronted her with it. Everyone would believe me. My parents and my husband, John, are here, listening to everything. Plus, this conversation is being recorded. Everyone present had heard her berate me and her intentions to purposely expose me to allergens. In fact, after leaving the restaurant, I immediately went to my parents' house and had John join us. I had informed them of the situation, and we were discussing our next steps when she called. So I swiftly switched the call to speaker and started recording it for evidence. As a result, we had her incriminating statements on tape. She was taken aback by my revelation and asked in a shaky voice, Wait, is John there with you? She never expected her son to find out and asked in a trembling voice. In response, her son, who had been silent and emotionless, gathering evidence, spoke up. I heard everything. I can't believe you do something like this, Mom, he said in a suppressed, angry tone. She hastily began making excuses. It wasn't like that. I didn't mean. Her desperate attempt seemed insincere, especially after her earlier outburst. His anger was evident as he shouted, not only towards Kate, but also towards Emily. I don't even want to think of you as my mother anymore. We're cutting ties. Given the true nature of the mother he had trusted, John was beyond furious. He then declared his estrangement from her, ignoring her cries. Furthermore, my parents said that they would sue her for attempted murder, and John cut off the call, disregarding her voice. Later, when John informed his father about the incident, he was furious and suggested divorce, eventually throwing her out of the house. With no relatives to rely on, no income, and being a housewife, she clung desperately, pleading and crying. Her husband, feeling a final bit of pity, put her in a basic apartment, paid the first month's rent, and told her to find work so she could support herself. But having been a housewife, she seemed to lack the drive to work, and, for some reason, clung to both John and me. She barged into our house demanding money, but we drove her away, telling her to earn it herself, especially John, who was extremely stern, ensuring she wouldn't approach our house again. Later on, rumors suggested she started working at a nearby supermarket, but she seemed quite disheveled. Given her nasty attitude, she had no one to rely on and seemed to be struggling on her own. I hope she continues to work hard, both for her own expenses and to pay us the compensation. And I want her to stay out of our lives. As for why she did what she did, it seems she was jealous of me and wanted to see me suffer. John's ex-wife had moved in after graduating from a vocational school and became a housewife. She was submissive, obeyed her mother-in-law, and had a quiet nature due to her unpleasant character, which made her disliked by women and her enjoyment in bullying those weaker than herself. She used to take out her stress on John's ex-wife. However, I am independent, working, and getting promotions. I had a higher social status than her and was well regarded in our neighborhood. Initially, she liked me, thinking I was a competent daughter-in-law, but she gradually grew jealous. Being unable to bully me, she wished I'd be in a position where I'd become incompetent, wanting to look down on me. After the explosive call when John and his father confronted her, she confessed everything, leading to their declaration of cutting ties with her. Later, John apologized to his ex-wife for not noticing the bullying. At that time, he was new at his job and deeply trusted his mother, which blinded him to her behavior. Still, he felt he should have noticed and was regretful. His ex-wife assured him she was over it. She's dating someone now, and their conversation ended on a peaceful note. John felt relieved, knowing she was genuinely happy. Thanks to her help, I became friends with John's ex-wife. She's also career-oriented, and we get along well. Although she's his ex-wife, there's nothing concerning regarding their relationship, and I'm glad to have a friend close in age. After settling matters with the mother-in-law, John and his father threw me a promotion party. With the celebration from the two of them, I felt happy and determined to continue working hard without worrying about my mother-in-law.
I've decided to buy a luxury car. Honestly, it's more than I need, but my parents are also considering a new vehicle, and this one might be perfect for them. Since marrying Anthony, I've noticed some changes in his behavior. He's become more self-absorbed and, surprisingly, even a bit envious of the nice car my parents gifted me. I'm starting to feel fed up. My name is Emma, and I'm 29 years old. I met Anthony back in college, and we've been married for 2 years. Anthony's a socialite, charismatic, and well-liked, while I'm more reserved with a close-knit group of friends. Our relationship started off unexpectedly. It grew through shared classes and study groups. His interest took me by surprise, and when he asked me out, I was thrilled and accepted right away. That was the beginning of our journey together. Anthony's charm, relaxed nature, and dedication to his studies drew me to him. He was surrounded by friends and knew several stylish, attractive women, so I figured he'd have no trouble finding the girlfriend if he wanted. Once I asked him nervously if he really thought I was the one for him. His reaction threw me off. He looked surprised and asked why I would ask that. Feeling insecure, I just wanted reassurance, but after a thoughtful pause, he simply said he felt comfortable with me. It wasn't the heartfelt response I had hoped for, and before I could process it, he became engrossed in his phone. Not wanting to push the issue, I changed the subject and apologized, though the doubt lingered. On the surface, our relationship seemed fine. We graduated, got married, and settled into a condo. I landed a stable job while Anthony continued with graduate school and worked part-time. When I shared news of our engagement with my mom, she was ecstatic, admitting she'd started to wonder when I'd introduce a boyfriend. I felt a little guilty for not telling them about Anthony sooner, but my mom, knowing my independent nature, was just glad I had someone who cared about me. My parents have always been my role models. Like us, they met in college and have maintained a deep love and respect over the years. My dad climbed the corporate ladder while my mom followed her passion for cooking, eventually teaching culinary classes. They've always honored each other's independence and supported each other's dreams, and I want a marriage as nurturing and supportive as theirs. Growing up in a financially comfortable family, I learned the importance of independence early on. This influenced my choice not to follow Anthony into graduate school. I wanted to carve my own path. My dream has always been simple yet meaningful, to create a family environment as warm as the one I was raised in, complete with a loving marriage and perhaps children someday. But as we settled into married life, things started to change. Anthony's financial contributions were minimal while he focused on his studies and part-time job. One day, I brought up the idea of him contributing a bit more towards our expenses. His response was dismissive. "I do contribute, Emma. Didn't we agree you'd cover the living expenses when we moved in?" His words left me uneasy. Anthony's dream of becoming a professor was clear, and I admired his dedication. But as he pursued his career, I felt increasingly burdened by our finances. Despite my assurances that I could manage with my stable income, his curt retort made me wonder if we were truly working as a team. When I first brought it up, I stammered, giving a feeble agreement, unsure how to push back. He sighed heavily. "You wouldn't understand, Emma. Being a graduate student is expensive." Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "Oh, and I need $26,000 for a research trip. Can you lend it to me? I'll pay you back." His requests for money became more frequent, and the tension in our relationship steadily grew. Anthony often stayed out late, leaving me alone with meals that went cold and unanswered phone calls. Yet whenever he returned, his mood was upbeat. He casually compliment my cooking or suggest spontaneous plans, making me feel value for a moment. These fleeting gestures of kindness gave me brief glimpses of the joyful marriage I longed for, pushing me to avoid the deeper issues between us. But despite my efforts, feelings of loneliness and anxiety became my constant companions, caught in a cycle of temporary happiness followed by long periods of isolation. I struggled to confide in anyone about my feelings, especially my parents who seemed so happy for us. But they likely sensed that something was off. After a long time away, I visited them, and my father suggested I stay for dinner. My mom went all out, cooking a meal filled with warmth and welcome. During dinner, my father mentioned that Aunt Margaret had recently visited. "She was asking about you," he said, describing her as spirited, ambitious, and fiercely independent, the very traits that define her. "I'll reach out to her soon." "Thanks, Dad," I replied, feeling their gentle encouragement to reconnect with family. My father shared fond memories of Margaret, recalling how she often joked that Anthony had whisked me away. Margaret, who had never planned to marry herself, had always been more of a mentor than just an aunt. I could talk to her about things too complex to bring up with my parents, and she'd always understood me deeply, providing advice and support whenever I was navigating new chapters in my life. Though I'd been hesitant to open up to Margaret about my relationship with Anthony, my visit to my parents sparked a desire to reach out to her. A few days later, we met at a cozy cafe. Margaret, ever so stylish, greeted me with a warm look and offered a bit of fashion advice. "Marriage is more than just the ceremony, Emma," she said. smiling as she sipped her tea. It's important to feel confident and keep up with yourself. Your appearance says a lot about how you feel. Take care of it. In that moment, I realized I'd been neglecting my interests and quickly apologized for losing touch. Margaret chuckled, saying, "That's just like you, Emma. It's good to be earnest, but your timidity likely comes from not stepping out enough." Hearing about Anthony had made her happy. She thought I was finally ready to move forward. We hadn't spent a day just relaxing together in such a long time, and the beautiful weather made our outing even more delightful. As we settled on the cafe's sunny terrace, I felt at ease enough to open up about my concerns with Anthony. At first, I thought that even someone as reserved as I am could make things work with him, but recently, I was beginning to have doubts. Margaret listened quietly, her gentle nods showing empathy. When I finished, she softly asked, "Have you shared any of this with your parents, Emma?" "No," I admitted. "I was hesitant to tell even you today. I didn't want to seem vulnerable. I felt like I needed to handle this on my own to prove my independence. If my parents knew, they'd probably insist I move back home." Margaret respected my choice to manage things alone but offered reassurance. "If you ever need help, I'm here for you, Emma. I'll support you no matter what." About a month later, my mom called, casually saying, "Whenever you're free, could you drop by? Nothing urgent." Since I had the next day off, I decided to visit. As I approached their house, I noticed a new car in the driveway. I gasped, excitement bubbling up. "Is this car new, Dad? Did you just buy it? Can I take it for a spin?" With a warm smile, my dad reassured me, "This car is yours, Emma. Use it however you like. We thought it would be useful." My mom added softly, "We remembered how much you liked this model when you saw it in an ad. We thought it might cheer you up, especially since you've been going through a rough patch." Their thoughtful gesture, a shiny new SUV from a renowned international brand, filled me with an overwhelming sense of support and reminded me that, no matter how hard things got, I always had a place to come home to. Dad even arranged a parking spot near my condo. I was deeply moved by their generosity. I laughed in disbelief, struggling to comprehend their kindness. Later, as I drove downtown, I pulled out the car keys and pressed the button, watching the SUV's lights flash brightly. That's when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "What's with the new car?" Anthony asked. I turned, stunned to see my husband, who had been absent for ages. His sudden appearance left me speechless. He looked at the car, a smug grin spreading across his face. "A gift from your parents?" Every time I faced Anthony, words seemed to catch in my throat, but I was exhausted from feeling small. "Anthony, don't you care anymore? Do you even care about me?" I managed, my voice trembling but brimming with newfound courage. His response was sharp and dismissive. "Are you just realizing this now? Did you really think I loved you all this time? It's ridiculous how hopeful you are." His mocking laughter stung, and something within me snapped. "Then why did you marry me?" I shot back, louder than intended. Anthony's expression darkened, his voice cold and blunt. "Oh, so you're going to be that blunt? Marrying you was just convenient. And now, what? You want the car too? It's wasted on you." I was stunned by the harshness of his words. Seemingly unfazed, he added with chilling indifference, "We're getting a divorce. And without me, you'll never find another man. Think about that." With that, he turned and left without a second glance, leaving me feeling shattered yet oddly resolute. Sitting in the driver's seat, I fought to calm myself, my mind racing. After a few days of reflection and a heartfelt conversation with Aunt Margaret, I agreed to the divorce and moved back in with my parents, who welcomed me with open arms. Life felt peaceful again, if only for a while. But that peace was short-lived. One afternoon, Anthony appeared at my parents' house, his parents in tow. They all settled stiffly into the living room, and Anthony's father spoke first, his tone stern. "We're here to discuss our son's divorce." As the conversation began to unfold, I felt a surge of determination rise within me. This time, I wouldn't be silenced. "If you don't agree to the divorce," I started, my voice steady, "then let me make myself clear." I warned Anthony that I would leverage Brian's connections at the university to jeopardize his future. It wouldn't take much to tarnish the career of a junior registrar if their daughter filed a complaint. Anthony, who suddenly seemed more concerned, was taken aback by my assertiveness. He viewed my tactics as aggressive and intimidating. His father vehemently argued, "We could easily contest the divorce, Emma. Beneath her simple appearance, she's manipulative and greedy. Poor Anthony. I've heard she even paid him to stay away." She must have entertained other men. We should take this to family court and claim that Anthony was coerced into this divorce. But if Emma were to make a genuine apology, perhaps things could be different. Just then, Aunt Margaret suggested that relinquishing the SUV might help smooth things over. Anthony and his parents listened quietly, absorbing his father's protests. At that moment, the doorbell rang. My mom answered it, and Aunt Margaret walked in, her presence instantly shifting the atmosphere. "Sorry I'm late," she said, joining the tense gathering. Anthony's family, who had only met her once at my wedding, looked surprised. "What are you doing here?" Anthony's mother exclaimed, visibly annoyed. "It's rude to barge in like this. We're in the middle of something." Unfazed, Margaret replied, "You've heard about Anthony's divorce, haven't you?" "How would an outsider like you know about this?" Anthony's mother challenged. Margaret continued calmly, "I was informed by my brother earlier. I couldn't miss such an important moment for my niece." Anthony's mother shot back, "You're probably here to stop the divorce or for money. Are you still going to make accusations after seeing this?" Without missing a beat, Margaret pulled a stack of documents from her bag and spread them out on the table for everyone to see. "I hired a private detective to look into this," she revealed. "It turns out Anthony has been cheating on Emma with multiple women. He hardly came home because of it, taking advantage of Emma's kindness and even asking her for money." The revelation left everyone in stunned silence, and the tone of the meeting shifted dramatically as they processed the weight of Margaret's findings. I was deeply immersed in my university research, so when I finally made it home, we spent quality time together, sharing meals and exploring the world outside. To outsiders, we appeared like any other married couple. "Say something, Emma," Anthony pleaded, his voice tinged with desperation. "You don't need to defend yourself," his father quickly reassured him, eager to regain control of the situation. Margaret's unexpected intervention had illuminated the harsh reality of my troubled marriage, revealing Anthony's deceit and the manipulation I had endured. This new information forced everyone, especially Anthony's parents, to reconsider their approach to the divorce negotiations. "It's not your fault," Anthony's mother hastily added, clutching the documents suspiciously. "These must be fabricated. Our Anthony would never do such things. He's a kind, outstanding son." "Kind to his parents, maybe," Aunt Margaret interjected sharply, her calm demeanor belying her evident resolve. She pulled out a photograph from the stack of documents. "I was at a hotel for a business meeting recently and saw Anthony there with another woman, looking quite cozy. I had the detective investigate Anthony as well, and the results confirmed my suspicions." Anthony's mother's face drained of color as she grabbed the documents to examine them closely. "What is this, Anthony? How long has this been going on? These are all lies, aren't they?" she demanded, her voice trembling. Anthony tried to snatch the documents back, denying everything, but it was too late. The seeds of doubt had been sown. "You've been cheating on me. The car you wanted so badly was for her, wasn't it?" his mother accused, her voice cracking under the strain. No matter how much Anthony tried to soothe her, his mother was inconsolable. She stormed out of the house, tears streaming down her face, with Anthony stumbling after her, trying to explain. Amidst the chaos, he blurted out, "Hey, wait, what about me?" As he followed her, bewildered, the rest of us were left in stunned silence. Aunt Margaret, however, wore a satisfied smile and gave me a knowing wink. It was clear she had anticipated this dramatic turn of events and the revelations that would follow. After the tumultuous scene, Aunt Margaret confided in me that Anthony's parents had eventually separated. "You won't fall for such a terrible man again," she assured me, her tone protective yet empowering. "Let's focus on making you even more resilient. I'll teach you everything I know about grooming and self-care." Despite her busy schedule, Aunt Margaret made time for me, taking me out for meals and shopping trips. During this period, I absorbed a great deal from her, gaining a new perspective on self-care and confidence. Her guidance not only helped heal my wounds but also equipped me with the tools to build a stronger, more confident self. A year after my divorce, I made a life-altering decision to enroll in graduate school. This period marked a time of intense personal growth and transformation. One day, while waiting at a street intersection, I heard my name being called. I turned around to see Anthony, my ex-husband. He seemed genuinely surprised by my appearance and remarked on how much I had changed. At first glance, I barely recognized him. The man who once knew me as his unremarkable ex-wife now saw a woman who had blossomed into confidence and beauty. Meanwhile, Anthony's life had taken a sharp decline following his parents' very public and scandalous divorce. He had dropped out of graduate school after Kyle and Karen withdrew their financial support amidst the turmoil he had caused. Struggling to cover his tuition and living expenses, the carefree lifestyle he once enjoyed had become a distant memory. The women who had once shown interest in him had moved on, and his former social status had seemingly evaporated overnight. As Anthony was about to suggest we catch up, Jonathan, the man I was currently dating, approached us, his timing perfect and signaling a clear demarcation between my past and the new chapter I was embarking on, one that no longer included Anthony. Nearby, a group of women couldn't help but admire Jonathan, wondering aloud if he was a model. Observing my brief exchange with Anthony, Jonathan gave him a polite nod and said, "It's okay, we're done here. Let's go," taking my hand confidently. Anthony remained rooted to the spot, visibly shocked as Jonathan and continued on our way. My gaze stayed fixed ahead, concentrating on the road and the bright prospects that lay before us. I didn't glance back even once as we departed.
Sophia will recount how I took control of my life and put a stop to my husband Xander's destructive influence. For privacy reasons, I'll be using pseudonyms. As a prominent lawyer in my state, anonymity is crucial for various reasons. Let's not delve into the intricacies of my and Xander's love story. We fell in love, got married, and eventually divorced. The love, it seemed, wasn't reciprocal, as Xander cheated on me. The signs were apparent: avoidance, excessive time outside, and frequent business trips, though I wasn't involved in his sizable business. Despite my success as a lawyer, Xander considered me a failure due to earning less than him. One day, during another one of his supposed business trips, I decided to investigate. I discovered a secret Facebook account on his old laptop, confirming my suspicions. He was cheating with a beautiful woman, someone he found more attractive than me, often criticizing my appearance. Heartbroken and angered, I confronted him immediately. "Sandra, are you cheating on me?" "I have proof," I declared. Xander callously responded, "Sophia, you're just not that interesting anymore. You're always engrossed in pointless cases, neglecting me. Besides, you're not a supermodel who can captivate me with looks alone." Confused, I retorted, "What are you talking about, Xander? I have a demanding job, and you knew that when we got married. I haven't neglected you. It's you who stopped coming home and refused to communicate." And that's how I discovered Xander's affair when I finally decided to confront him. I anticipated a degree of remorse from him, but the cold response I received caught me off guard. He shifted all the blame onto me, justifying his cheating, a claim that held no validity. Refusing to be falsely accused, I pointed out the flaws in his accusations. Instead of defending his position, he turned cold once more and nonchalantly revealed that he was relieved I had discovered his affair. In a chilling tone, Xander declared, "Good that you found out, Sophia. I no longer have to hide my beautiful girlfriend. She and I will have a perfect life together after I divorce your useless self. Finally, I will marry someone who's worthy of me and my name." His words hit me like a ton of bricks, sending a cold shiver down my spine. As he spoke of divorce, he not only insulted me but also asserted that I was not good enough for him. Accusing me of being a bad wife, he showed no remorse for his affair and even boasted about how a mistress would make a better spouse. Tears streamed down my face as he demeaned me, proclaiming his affair with pride. This was the man I had loved for over a decade, and his words left me shattered. Through my tears, I asked, "How could you say that, Xander? All these years, I've been beside you through thick and thin, honoring my vows and valuing you above all else." His callous response cut deep, dismissing my worth. "Well, Sophia, it doesn't matter anymore. You're just not right for me. I'm now a proud business owner and a woman with average looks and a pretentious law degree won't do me any good. Feeling utterly demeaned, I protested. How could you, Xander? I'm a capable woman, even if I don't fit your narrow definition of beauty. I've been a good wife to you, and now you're contemplating divorce. Correcting me, he stated coldly. I'm not contemplating divorce, Sophia. I've already decided to divorce you. I'm done. I don't want to be with you anymore. I will file soon and have already hired a great lawyer. You better move out before I come home. I don't want to see your ugly face anymore. A few hours after Xander hung up on me, he sent the divorce papers through a friend who looked at me sympathetically. I numbly accepted the papers, shut the door, and cried miserably, letting the reality of my wasted years with a horrible man sink in. However, I decided I wouldn't let this break me. I was a strong woman who would take control of her life and teach Xander a lesson. When Xander's friend delivered the papers, he mentioned that Xander had talked about drawing out the divorce. Initially puzzled, it dawned on me that we had a prenup. Xander had insisted that I was entitled to half of his business if he cheated, something I had overlooked in my emotional turmoil. It made sense why Xander wanted to prolong the divorce. He hoped I would give up my rightful share. Determined not to let go of what was rightfully mine, I immediately called his lawyer and set up an appointment. Within 2 days, I moved out of Xander's house and into my childhood home, which was in my name. I texted Xander that I had already moved my belongings, asserting, I took my ugly face and body out of your Dan house. Good that you've come to your senses and not making a fuss. Xander responded, boasting about his lawyer's reputation, but I calmly warned him, I won't give you my business, that's for sure. For now, you will stay away from me. Determined to uphold the prenup, I was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. I don't want to talk to you. You can only speak to me through my lawyers now, and I expect you to empty my house. Xander's words ignited a surge of boiling rage within me. It's astonishing how anger and hatred can fuel one's determination when faced with such utter contempt. My mind cleared, and I couldn't help but almost laugh at Xander's ignorance. He had no clue who he was up against. Doubtful that his lawyer, Jake, knew either, I arranged a meeting with him at a cafe. Upon seeing me, Jake began to visibly tremble, only calming down upon recognizing me. He seemed confident, but not enough. Jake was a decent lawyer, but he hadn't anticipated facing off against someone like me. Xander never considered me influential, so Jake was utterly unprepared for our encounter. Jake appeared nervous and his hands shook, but I refrained from further intimidation. He wasn't to blame for my predicament. Hello, Jake. Nice to see you here, I greeted, noticing his surprise. If you have any doubts, let me clear them for you. Yes, I am the wife. Ma'am, I'm so sorry. I wasn't expecting you to show up. Jake stammered, flustered by my presence. The surnames don't match because I got married after I received my law degree. I used my maiden name for official purposes, I explained. Ah, I see, Jake muttered, visibly uncomfortable. So, I'm guessing you want to drag out this case. That's what my client has told me. Your client has been misleading you, Jake. He's the one who wants to prolong this case. Isn't that what he told you? I confronted him directly, knowing my reputation as a lawyer spoke volumes. Jake squirmed under my scrutiny. Accustomed to asking the right questions, I didn't mince words. You don't have to answer that, Jake. I've known Xander for over a decade. I married that idiot for God's sake. I know what goes through his thick head. Concerned for Jake's predicament, I decided to enlighten him. Since I know you, and it's not fair on you, I'll tell you the truth about this divorce. What do you mean, ma'am? Jake inquired, clearly taken aback. Did my dear husband mention to you that he cheated on me? I asked pointedly, watching Jake's expression for confirmation. His reaction spoke volumes, confirming my suspicions. Once again, Jake was caught off guard by my revelation. I won't lie to you guys. It did sting and hurt my ego to admit to my colleague that I had been cheated on. It's not a pleasant experience. However, I knew better than to betray my emotions. No matter how humiliated I felt, I still had the upper hand, and I was well aware of that. Jay, on the other hand, didn't know. He said, No, I don't think my client has told me about that. But he did warn me that, in his words, you would make some baseless accusations because you want to ruin him. Oh, you poor thing, Jake. Your client has played you like a fiddle. Although it might make you happy to know that Xander thinks you are one of the best lawyers out there. Well, that's a big compliment, but I will never measure up to you, ma'am, Jake confessed. I wish he had told me that his wife also practices law. He only told me that you work at a law firm. My husband never really took my accomplishments seriously. He had a habit of undermining my work and influence. It was foolish of me to stay with him this long. However, it was smart of me to sign the prenup to save my butt, I shared. Jake was completely taken aback by the mention of the word prenup. He looked shocked, and the term seemed foreign to him. I didn't need to be a rocket scientist to know that he had been ambushed again. Xander had conveniently forgotten to mention the prenup to Jake, perhaps hoping I had forgotten about it. Well, who knows? It didn't matter. Since the word of the prenup was out there, Jake was frazzled. There's a prenup in this marriage? Your husband hadn't mentioned that. Do you have any proof, ma'am? Jake inquired. Oh, I do have plenty of proof, Jake. I brought the papers along. I had a feeling that Xander would try to get out of dealing with the consequences of his actions. Well, not on my watch. I would really like to see the papers, ma'am. Also, I think I would need to see proof of his affair if you have any. Don't worry, Jake. I brought along everything. Like I said, it isn't me who wants to drag out this divorce. The sooner it happens, the better it is for me. I handed over all the evidence to Jake, from messages to pictures and documents. I had all the proof right in my handbag, casually giving them to Jake, knowing that the case would always go in my favor. Jake studied each and every document thoroughly before signing and looking rather defeated. He then looked at me and said, I see that you have solid proof of everything, ma'am. I had no idea about all of these things. I figured that out, Jake. Also, I know how difficult it is to work with unreliable clients, especially when the opposite party has an equally strong lawyer for their case. You're right about that, ma'am. I think that's all I needed to talk about today. I believe I need to have a serious conversation with my client before I decide to proceed with his case. I'm sure someone will contact you soon, although I can't say that it will be me. I could tell what Jake was hinting at but didn't comment on it. I thanked him for his time and proceeded to walk out of the cafe. I went straight to work and started to prepare my own documents for the divorce. All the lingering sadness was gone. Now, there was this rage within me that was driving me to make sure Xander suffered for what he had done, and I knew he had no way out of this mess he had created. It took Xander one day to get back to me. He called me on my number despite telling me not to contact him directly. It was funny but not surprising. I knew he would find himself in this situation. When I answered his call, he sounded very pissed off. What the hell did you say to my lawyer, Sophia? My, look who's calling after telling me to stay away. Now what happened with your lawyer, Xander? Stop playing around, Sophia. Tell me what you told him that made him quit today. Your lawyer quit today? How sad, Xander. I guess you should have been upfront about your situation and who they would be fighting against. You don't know what you're saying? You are a freaking nobody. I won't let you take away my family business. Oh, I would like to see you try, Xander. I will hire a better lawyer and doubt you. Just wait and watch. I will destroy you in court. You will come to me begging for mercy. Well, sounds like a plan, Xander. Good luck with that. But a word of advice from a lawyer. Remember to tell your new lawyer about your affair and the prenup. When I said that, Xander simply hung up on me. It made me chuckle. He was in deep trouble but still didn't know it. He would try every lawyer in town and see if anyone would represent him. I am a known name here, so people knew not to mess with me. Plus, anyone stupid enough to believe his lies would be dragged down to reality when I presented them with my ammo. Xander said that he would make me beg for mercy. I knew that it would be a matter of time before he would come begging at my door. I was right in thinking that Xander would be back, begging at my door. He literally had no other choice. One fine morning, while I was getting ready for work, there was a knock at my door. I was a little confused about who showed up at such an odd time. Imagine my surprise when I opened the door and found my soon-to-be ex-husband, looking forlorn and weary. I invited him in because I didn't want the scene outside my home. I was already dealing with enough. When he came inside, I said, "Make it quick, Xander. I don't have enough time to waste on you. I don't even know why you're here. We were supposed to strictly communicate through lawyers only." "Yeah, about that. I haven't found a good divorce lawyer yet." "Oh, that's sad for you, Xander. You better hurry up because I hear that your mistress has been dying to marry you." "I'm not worried about her anymore." "Listen, Sophia, we need to talk. You have been sabotaging my lawyer so that they wouldn't take my case. That is very unfair." I immediately laughed when he said that. I couldn't believe that Xander would have the audacity to pin the entire blame on me. This once again showed how little he valued my profession. He thought that just because he was willing to throw money, people would pull at his feet. Oh dear, that's an amazing joke, Xander. Let me just clear that misconception for you. I haven't been sabotaging anything. It's your stupidity that's causing trouble. I don't understand. What did I even do? Should I remind you how you lied to your lawyers about the affair and the prenup? That is enough to make them look like fools in court. Do you think lawyers would jump at representing unreliable clients like you? Besides, I will admit that my name will make a lot of people walk away. You may consider me to be useless, but I actually do have a good name in this profession. Yes, I know that now, Sophia. I've tried being open with lawyers too, but none of them are willing to help me. That's what happens when you try to go against an ironclad prenup. You really should have thought your affair through, Xander. Not that it matters now. The damage is done. No sane lawyer would fight for your cause. You'll be giving me half of your business. Xander's facial expression said it all. He didn't want to lose his business. I mean, that's why he tried to pick a good lawyer and drag out the divorce. He wanted to keep me hanging long enough until I would snap and just leave him alone without demanding half of his company. After a few days, it became clear to him that no one would take his side. Hell, he was even finding it hard to find any lawyer who would go against me. So, he did what he thought was his last resort. He started to cry and beg. "Sophia, you know how much this business means to me. Please don't do this. You can take everything else, but please don't ask to split the business." "Why not, Xander? You were the one who put in the clause of splitting the business in case you cheated. You think I will give up my rights that easily? I deserve it after the betrayal you threw in my face. It was all a mistake, Sophia, believe me. I have actually put my relationship on hold because I know what a big mistake it was. Maybe, just maybe, we can give this marriage a try. I can say for sure that this hurdle will only make us stronger." Xander's words made me laugh out loud again. The audacity of this man was unmatched by anyone I knew. I really didn't know what to say. He was actually asking to get back together, as if I would be stupid enough to do that. I did know that he had put a pause on his relationship with his mistress. The rumors were out that the mistress was not happy, and neither was Xander. But if he thinks this will make me go back to him, he is dead wrong. I already made the mistake of marrying a piece of and learned my lesson the hard way. Plus, I knew why he was suddenly desperate to get me back. You must be delusional for suggesting something like that, Xander. I didn't come this far in life by being utterly stupid. I know that you want to get back to me because you don't want to split your business. Sophia, we were happy together. Let's just look past this one time and restart our marriage. I will cut off my mistress. I swear there's no reason to do that, Xander. Believe me, that woman is going to start running once she finds out that you won't be very rich after the divorce. As for me, this is my golden chance to get out of this sham of a marriage. I must thank you for showing your true colors before we had kids. Now you will reap what you have sown." With that, I was pretty much done with my piece. I immediately stopped talking while Xander kept begging and pleading with me not to take his business. It was a rather pathetic scene, but it didn't move me at all. Instead, it made me think of the times I went to bed crying because this piece of expletive I call my husband decided to betray me. Seeing Xander in a vulnerable place only gave me satisfaction and completed my revenge. Now, I simply needed a clean break to start fresh. Well, I definitely got more than what I had bargained for. Karma hit Xander hard and fast. He tried for weeks to change my mind and make me come back home. I turned a blind eye to everything simply because I wasn't interested in his drama. I was ready to move on. Since he had filed for divorce already, I hired someone from my firm to represent me. I'm not a divorce lawyer, so I couldn't do it myself. Besides, I wanted as minimum interaction with him as possible. After a month of trying to change my mind, he was forced to get a lawyer and ask for a clean break. He knew that if I took the case to court, he would only face humiliation and ultimately waste money on lawyers appointed by the court. So he receded and asked for a mutual split. The prenup made it super easy for me to get the divorce. Of course, I had plenty of proof to show everyone that Xander cheated. As per the prenup, he was supposed to give up half of his business to me. He wasn't happy. But there was no way out, so he signed over half of it to me. We did give him an offer to buy me out, but he had no money. Now, why would a big business owner like Xander have no money, you ask? Well, he had spent it all on his mistress, who is now not taking his calls or texts. I guess she figured out that he won't be rich anymore. But now, no one is willing to date her because they know what a gold digger she is. What goes around comes around, I guess. Well, the mistress was the least of Xander's troubles. With half of his business gone, his earnings were severely reduced. He had to sell his house because he didn't have much money to maintain it or even pay the mortgage properly. He's currently renting a condo that is a serious downgrade from the big mansion he stayed at. He did try to get back with me again in the hopes of regaining full control of his business. Well, safe to say that is never happening. He now either has to continue the way it is or manage to save enough money to buy me out. If you want to know about me, I'm actually doing pretty well. I have appointed someone to take care of my share of Xander's business, and so far, things have been amazing. I ended up upgrading my lifestyle by buying a new mansion due to my combined income from law practice and business. Things are going well. I'm living my best life, and I honestly couldn't be happier. All in all, the divorce played out well for me. Instead of getting played by my ex-husband and his mistress, I ended up ruining their lives and bettering mine.